By the time I walked through the front door, the weight of the day clung to me like a heavy coat I couldn't shake off. The faint scent of baby lotion wrapped around the house, blending with that sweet, powdery formula smell that seemed to live on every surface. Then came the sound that always made me stop in my tracks, my baby's giggle. It softened everything, the tiredness, the routine, the endless list of things to do. Still, I couldn't ignore the truth. Life wasn't the same anymore. Marriage had turned into a balancing act, filled with sacrifices nobody ever really warned me about. My husband was working late again. That was the story every night. He said it was for us, for our son, for the college fund he wanted to build. I told myself to believe him, but deep down, I noticed the chill of an empty bed and the quiet ache of evenings spent alone. His promises sounded noble, but they left a hollow echo in my chest. I'd catch myself wondering if this was simply what life after a baby was supposed to feel like, or if I was just becoming invisible in my own marriage. That night, though, I decided to bring something sweet into the mix. Literally. I stopped on my way home and picked up a small box of pastries, hoping they'd spark a longer, warmer chat with the babysitter. It wasn't just about the desserts. It was about connection, reassurance, and the comfort of knowing my son wasn't just looked after, but truly cared for. When I stepped into the living room and handed her the box, I smiled with real gratitude. What I didn't know was how much that ordinary night would soon twist into something I never saw coming. I kicked off my shoes and sank into the couch, letting the babysitter tell me about the day. She had this calm way of speaking, as if every little detail mattered. How many ounces he drank, the moment he tried to grab his rattle, even the nap that lasted 10 minutes too short. I listened closely, hanging on every word, because I needed to know my baby was okay when I wasn't here. Motherhood had turned me into a sponge, soaking up details no one else would bother to remember. As she spoke, I unwrapped the pastries, the sugary scent filling the air. We laughed lightly over which one looked too pretty to eat, and for a brief moment I felt a flicker of something normal, almost like two friends sharing a quiet evening. She seemed grateful for the gesture, and I was grateful too, not just for her help, but for the company. In those small conversations, I felt less alone, less like the weight of the world was resting entirely on my shoulders. Still, a small unease tugged at the back of my mind. Maybe it was the silence of the house when my husband wasn't there, or the way I was always the one trying to fill in the gaps he left behind. I pushed it down, telling myself not to spiral. After all, what harm was there in a simple chat, some pastries, and the reassurance that my son had been cared for? I didn't know then that the night had already started shifting beneath me, setting the stage for something I couldn't yet name. After a while, I leaned back, holding my coffee cup between my hands, and just watched her. She was young, patient, always so gentle with my son. A part of me felt relieved that I could trust her, that she carried some of the weight when I couldn't. I told myself that hiring her was one of the best decisions we'd made. Still, in the quiet pauses between our words, I caught myself wondering when exactly my marriage had started to feel like two separate lives running in parallel. The clock ticked softly on the wall, each second stretching into the space where my husband should have been. I thought about him at work, bent over files or screens, maybe grabbing a quick coffee to push through another late night. I wanted to believe that picture. I wanted to believe he was doing it all for us, but there was a heaviness in my chest I couldn't quite name, a nagging whisper I kept pushing aside, telling myself I was just tired. When the babysitter smiled at me, thanking me again for the pastries, I returned the smile easily, almost too easily. It was such a simple evening, nothing out of the ordinary, and yet I felt something stir beneath the surface, like the calm before a storm. I didn't know it yet, but the quietness of that night was about to be shattered in a way that would change everything I thought I knew about trust, loyalty, and the walls of my own home. She excused herself for just a moment, heading to the bathroom, and left her phone on the sofa between us. I didn't think twice about it until the buzzing started. At first, it was just one vibration, soft against the cushions, then another, and another. The sound filled the silence of the room, growing sharper with every second. I tried to ignore it, but curiosity pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't push away. My eyes fell to the screen, and that's when the world seemed to tilt. His name, my husband's name, flashing over and over again, as if the phone itself was trying to scream at me. My stomach tightened, a cold rush running through my veins. He knew I was home. He knew I'd walked through the door hours ago. So why was he calling her, of all people, at this very moment? The question burned through me, sparking something I didn't want to face. I sat frozen, staring at the glowing screen as though it might explain itself. It didn't. The vibration finally stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its place, but the damage was done. My heart pounded so loud I was sure she would hear it when she came back into the room. And yet, I forced myself to breathe, to hold still, to tuck the confusion deep inside where she couldn't see it. Because in that instant, suspicion had taken root, and I couldn't unsee what I had just seen. When she returned, wiping her hands on a towel, I forced my lips into a smile so natural it almost scared me. I asked about the baby's last feeding, nodded at her answers, and even laughed at some silly story she shared. All the while, my pulse was hammering in my ears, drowning out her words. I couldn't stop replaying that name on the screen, my husband's name, glowing like a warning sign. Every second I acted normal felt like walking a tightrope, pretending I wasn't already falling. Inside, my thoughts were spinning. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he had a question about the baby. But why call her? Why not me? Why at that exact moment when I was sitting right here, close enough to answer any doubt myself? Logic and panic clashed inside me, each one louder than the other. I told myself to breathe, to stay calm, to not give her a single reason to suspect what I now suspected. She didn't seem to notice a thing. She sat back down, sipping water, scrolling through her phone as if it held no secrets. And I watched her. The way her cheeks flushed slightly, the way she avoided my eyes for just a second too long. It could have been nothing. But in my gut, I knew better. Something had shifted. Something wasn't right. And I felt that truth settle in my chest like a stone I could no longer ignore. I kept my face calm, but inside, I was unraveling. Every gesture she made, every glance at her phone now felt loaded with meaning. I caught myself wondering if she knew I'd seen the call, if she sensed the storm rising behind my quiet eyes. The air between us felt heavier, thicker, as though the truth itself was sitting in the room with us, daring me to speak. But I didn't. I tucked it away, waiting, listening, pretending. She gathered her things a little while later, smiling politely as she wished me good night. I handed her the box of leftover pastries, thanked her for taking care of the baby, and watched her walk out the door. My body felt stiff, every muscle holding back the urge to scream, to demand answers, to tear the silence wide open. But instead, I breathed through it, rocking my son gently in my arms, whispering soft words he couldn't understand, just to soothe my own trembling hands. When the door clicked shut, the house fell still. My husband's voice echoed in my mind, all his excuses, all his extra hours at work. Suddenly, they sounded different, not like promises, but like lies. And as I laid my baby down in his crib, I felt something shift inside me, something steady and unbreakable. I wasn't just a wife with questions anymore. I was a woman who needed the truth, no matter how much it might hurt to find it. I didn't say a word when she left. I just stood there in the silence, staring at the door as if answers might slip back through it. My heart was pounding, but my mind had already made a quiet, steady decision. I strapped my baby into his car seat, kissed his forehead, and whispered a promise I wasn't sure I'd be able to keep, that everything was going to be okay. Then I grabbed my keys, my hands trembling just enough to betray the storm raging inside me. The night air was cool as I stepped outside, but it did nothing to calm the heat burning through my chest. I slid into the driver's seat, the familiar smell of car seats and baby wipes filling the air, grounding me for a moment. My fingers tightened on the wheel, and I pulled out of the driveway, headlights slicing through the dark streets. I wasn't chasing shadows anymore. I was chasing the truth. Every turn of the road made my stomach twist tighter. I told myself not to assume, not to imagine what I might find. But the suspicion had already taken shape, sharp, and undeniable. I could almost see him, picture him where he shouldn't be, and that image carved itself into my thoughts with every passing block. By the time I reached her street, my breath was shallow, my chest tight, and I knew there was no turning back. As I turned the corner, her house came into view, dimly lit with only a lamp glowing in the front window. I slowed the car, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. And then I saw it. His car. Parked neatly along the curb, sitting there like an uninvited truth I had no choice but to face. My breath caught, sharp and jagged, as if the night air itself had turned against me. There it was, the confirmation I'd been dreading, shining back at me in metal and headlights. My chest felt hollow, like everything I'd believed about us had just been ripped away. Every late-night excuse, every "I'm doing this for our son," echoed in my mind, collapsing under the weight of what was right in front of me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to hit the steering wheel until my hands gave out. But I didn't. I just sat there, staring at that car, letting the betrayal settle into my bones like ice. In that moment, I realized something had shifted in me. I wasn't fragile anymore, not the woman who believed every word he fed me. I was sharper, stronger, fueled by the anger clawing its way through my veins. My hands were steady now as I turned off the headlights and parked further down the street. I didn't need to imagine anymore. The truth was here, and it was waiting for me to claim it. I sat in the dark for what felt like forever, the hum of the engine the only sound between me and the storm inside my chest. My baby shifted softly in the back seat, and I reached my hand toward him, brushing his blanket with my fingertips. That tiny, steady presence anchored me, reminded me why I couldn't look away, why I needed to know. He deserved a mother who wouldn't live blind to lies, who wouldn't let deception grow unchecked under her own roof. Through the windshield, I stared at the front door, every nerve in my body alive with dread. I imagined the scene inside, the babysitter's laugh, his voice, maybe even the same easy smile he used to give me. The thought sliced through me, raw and merciless, but I didn't flinch. The truth had been circling me for weeks, and now it had finally landed here, at this doorstep. All I had to do was step forward and face it. My fingers brushed against my phone, an unconscious move, as if preparing myself for what might come next. Part of me wanted to walk away, to drive back home and pretend none of this had ever happened. But the stronger part, the part that had been forged through sleepless nights and silent tears, knew better. Tonight wasn't about pretending. Tonight was about finally seeing what had been hidden in plain sight all along. I waited until my breathing steadied, until the fire in my chest became something I could carry instead of something that could consume me. Then, with my baby in my arms, I stepped out of the car. The night air hit my face like ice, but it didn't slow me down. Each step toward her door was heavy with purpose, my heartbeat matching the rhythm of my footsteps. I wasn't sneaking, I wasn't hiding. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they'd done. The babysitter opened the door, and the look on her face told me everything before a single word was spoken. Her eyes widened, her skin drained of color, and her lips parted like she'd forgotten how to breathe. Behind her, in the dim glow of the living room, stood my husband. The man who'd promised me forever. His mouth opened as if to explain, to smooth over the wreckage with words, but nothing came out. The silence between us was louder than any confession. I stood there, my baby cradled against me, staring at the two people who had turned my home into a lie. My hands didn't shake, my voice didn't waver. I didn't need to scream to be heard. The truth was already roaring through that room, stripping them both bare. And as I looked into his eyes, I knew the time for excuses was over. He had built this moment himself, brick by brick, lie by lie. He tried to speak, stumbling over words that sounded hollow before they ever left his mouth. "Lauren, this isn't..." But I cut through his stammer with nothing more than silence and the look in my eyes. He had lied too many times for me to care about his rehearsed lines now. The babysitter clutched the edge of the door, frozen like a child caught in a crime, her lips trembling but offering no defense. It was almost pathetic, the way they both seemed smaller under the weight of what they'd done. I shifted my son gently in my arms, pressing my cheek against his soft hair, and spoke with a calm I didn't even know I possessed. All those late nights, all those hours you said you were saving for his future, you weren't saving anything. You were just spending what little we had left of us. My words landed heavy, cutting through the silence like glass breaking. His eyes dropped, and I saw the shame flicker across his face, though he couldn't hold it long enough to feel it. The babysitter looked at him, searching for him to defend her, to say something that would lessen the sting of my words. But he had nothing. And for the first time, I felt the power shift. I wasn't the woman left at home wondering anymore. I wasn't the one carrying the weight of doubt. I was the one standing in the doorway with the truth, and they were the ones exposed in the harsh light of it. I locked my gaze on him, steady and unblinking, until he finally lifted his eyes to meet mine. "You were supposed to protect us," I said, my voice low but sharp enough to cut. "You were supposed to build something for him. For us. Instead, you tore it down with your own hands." The room seemed to shrink around us, every corner echoing with the truth neither of them could run from. He swallowed hard, but still no words came. Silence had become his only confession. I could feel the babysitter shifting uncomfortably, her body practically folding in on itself. She tried to mutter something, maybe an apology, maybe a weak excuse, but I didn't even glance her way. She was nothing more than the shadow he'd chosen to hide behind. My focus was on him, on the man who'd vowed to love me, who'd betrayed not just me, but the tiny heartbeat resting peacefully in my arms. I stepped back then, tightening my hold on my baby, my strength growing in the space his weakness left behind. The image was seared into my mind, the two of them, pale and cornered, stripped of their lies. I didn't need to raise my voice or demand an explanation. I had all the answers I needed, and they were standing right there in front of me. And as I turned toward the door, I already knew the next move was mine, and it would cut deeper than either of them could ever imagine. I walked out of that house without looking back, the night air wrapping around me like a shield. My baby stirred softly in my arms, his tiny sigh the only sound I needed to hear. Behind me, I knew they stood in silence, two people stripped bare, left with nothing but shame. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Betrayal had a way of breaking something inside you, but it also sharpened you, carved you into someone who would never be fooled again. And I wasn't going to let this end with me walking away quietly. Once home, I laid my son gently in his crib and stood there for a long moment, watching him sleep. His chest rose and fell with such steady peace, and I felt my resolve harden. He deserved a mother who would fight for him, who would make sure he never grew up in the shadow of lies. So I picked up my phone, snapped through the photos I'd taken before I left, and felt a strange calm wash over me. Proof. Cold, undeniable proof. The next morning, while the sun was barely rising, I sent those photos to his boss and to both our families. Every single person who believed in his story of sacrifice would see the truth of who he really was. My hands didn't shake as I pressed send. They were steady, deliberate, fueled by the fire that had been burning in me for weeks. He wanted secrets. I gave him exposure, and it was only the beginning. By midday, my phone was buzzing nonstop. His sister called, his mother texted, even his boss left a voicemail dripping with disappointment. The image of him as the devoted husband, the sacrificing father, had shattered in a matter of hours, and he had no one to blame but himself. I imagined him sitting there, phone in hand, realizing the walls he'd built around his lies were caving in. That was my justice, watching his carefully crafted mask fall apart for everyone to see. When he finally called me, I didn't answer, not once. I let every ring echo into silence, because there was nothing left for him to explain. My silence spoke louder than any words ever could. He wanted me to carry the weight of his betrayal quietly, to protect his image while I broke in the shadows. But I refused. Now it was his turn to carry the shame, to feel the sting of whispers behind his back, to live with the truth exposed. Later that evening, I met with my lawyer. Filing for divorce wasn't just about leaving him. It was about protecting my son and myself. Custody, financial security, freedom. All of it was mine to claim now, and I wasn't going to hesitate. Betrayal had tried to make me weak, but instead, it had forged me into something unshakable. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking back my life, step by step. That night, after the chaos of the day had settled, I sat in the nursery with the only person who truly mattered. The soft glow of the nightlight painted the room in warmth as I rocked him gently, his tiny fingers curling around mine. For the first time in weeks, I felt a calmness settle over me, not because everything was perfect, but because I finally knew the truth, and I had chosen strength over silence. I whispered to him, words he couldn't yet understand but that I needed to say aloud. "We'll be just fine, sweetheart. Better than fine. We don't need him to build our future." My voice cracked, but it wasn't from weakness. It was from release, from letting go of the weight that had chained me to his lies. I kissed my son's forehead and held him tighter, breathing in the sweet scent of his baby skin like it was medicine for my soul. And as I rocked him to sleep, I realized revenge wasn't just about exposing him. It was about reclaiming myself. He had tried to make me small, but I'd shown him I was far stronger than he ever imagined. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, in this quiet room with my baby safe in my arms, I finally felt peace. And I knew, without a doubt, that this was only the beginning of a life we would build, on our own terms.